My name is Danielle Foster, and I was 18 years old the day my uncle humiliated me in front of my entire family. It was supposed to be my birthday. My moment. The kitchen table was cluttered with plastic utensils, melting ice cream, and a half-eaten sheet cake that said, "To the future," in blue icing. But no one at that table had any idea what my future actually looked like until I opened my mouth. I stood up, nervous but steady, and said 5 words that would change everything. I'm joining the U.S. Army. At first, silence, then a scoff. Then his voice. You. That word came out of my Uncle Frank like a punchline. He looked around the room like someone had just told the world's funniest joke, then laughed, loud, chesty, confident. You'd faint in the recruitment line, sweetheart. What are you gonna do, talk them to death? Everyone laughed. My cousins, my dad. Even a couple of my aunts trying to hide their smiles behind paper napkins. I didn't laugh. I just stood there, my hands clenched under the table, my birthday balloon tugging slightly at the air above my chair like it wanted to fly away from the tension. That laugh, that moment, etched itself into my spine. Uncle Frank had always been the military man in the family. Retired cop, former Marine, carried himself like his shadow outranked the rest of us, and he'd made it very clear since I was little that I was not built for service. Too quiet, too soft, too female. But what they all missed that night was this. That laughter didn't break me. It branded me. Growing up, I was always the girl who didn't quite fit the mold. While others wore pink and played house, I was dissecting maps, memorizing military rankings, and obsessing over strategy games. I idolized leaders, not celebrities. I wanted to be strong, decisive, and capable. But in my family, that wasn't impressive. It was inconvenient. My father loved me, sure, but he didn't understand me. My mother supported me quietly, like a flickering candle in a room full of floodlights. And Frank? He made sure every gathering reminded me where I didn't belong. He'd call me Soldier Barbie when I wore boots, said I was too smart to waste it on push-ups. Every dig, every insult, every smirk when I said I wanted to enlist, it all added up. But that birthday was different. That night, I didn't fight back. I didn't shout. I didn't even finish my slice of cake. I left. And the very next morning, I walked into the recruitment office, signed the paperwork, and never looked back. The silence from my family afterward? Deafening. No calls. No texts. Not even a good luck. It was like I had betrayed them somehow by daring to step into a world they thought I couldn't survive. But I wasn't joining the army for applause. I was joining it because I needed to know who I really was outside of their expectations. Outside of the kitchen table, outside of their jokes, outside of the limitations they'd wrapped around me since childhood, I needed to earn my own voice. Basic training hit hard and fast. We woke up at 4:30 a.m. every morning to screaming voices and freezing water. My body ached in places I didn't know existed. My arms felt like dead weight. My feet blistered within the first 48 hours. But I kept going. Because I had something they didn't. Fire. And even when I stumbled, when I came dead last in my first timed run, when I couldn't finish the obstacle course on day 3, when my muscles locked up mid-March, I didn't cry. I didn't complain. I pushed. Because I remembered every laugh, every eye roll, every person who thought I couldn't make it out of the lobby of the recruitment office. I turned their doubt into discipline. Week 6, I received a package from my mom. Inside was a simple care package, protein bars, lotion, photos. Tucked between the socks was a small folded note. It was from my cousin Eric, Frank's son. Dad says you won't make it past week 8. He's betting $100 on it. I stared at the note for a full minute, and then I folded it back up, slid it into the side of my boot, and went back outside. That letter didn't break me. It hardened me. Every night, when I unlaced my boots, I'd feel that note against my skin. Not as a wound, but as a reminder. They weren't waiting for me to succeed. They were counting on my failure. But I didn't quit. I graduated top 3rd in my class. Not because I was the strongest, not because I was the fastest. Because I never stopped showing up. And while everyone else called home to proud parents and excited siblings, my only phone call was to my mother. She cried when I told her. Frank didn't want to come, she whispered. He said it wasn't real leadership if it came in lipstick. I laughed, not because it was funny, because it confirmed everything I already knew. This wasn't about who I was. It was about who they were too afraid to let me become. I'm not going to pretend I walked into my first deployment fearless. No one does. Fear isn't weakness. It's information. It tells you what matters. It sharpens your mind. And for me, it reminded me that I wasn't just fighting for a flag or a mission. I was fighting to never go back to being the girl who was laughed at around the family dinner table. After basic, I was stationed at Fort Carson, a base that felt less like a home and more like a proving ground. Some soldiers there had seen action. Others were waiting for their chance. Everyone walked like they had something to prove, including me. The first few weeks were brutal in a different way. No screaming drill sergeants, no countdown clocks, just silence, eyes, quiet evaluations. They sized me up before I even spoke. Some saw a short woman with a soft face and assumed I'd been transferred in by mistake. Others saw the rank and gave a shrug of tolerance, not respect. But I didn't flinch. I had learned something powerful in basic. People can't unsee results. So I showed up early, stayed late, ran longer, carried more, volunteered for the jobs no one wanted, logistics, night watches, even PT on weekends. And slowly, things started to shift. The whispers behind my back stopped. The quiet skepticism started turning into quiet observation. They were watching me now, but not because they doubted. They were curious. Maybe she's the real thing. Then came the orders. Middle East, forward operating base, tensions high, climate harsh, unforgiving terrain. We were briefed, packed, shipped. And just like that, I was in a convoy, rolling through the kind of dust that eats into your bones. And I was still only 19. Funny how much older your soul feels when your uniform's soaked in sweat and the hum of a distant drone makes everyone flinch. But I didn't flinch. I listened. I learned. I watched every movement of the senior officers. How they gave orders, how they read maps, how they looked at the terrain as if it could talk back. And when I was assigned to a field team for security patrol rotations, I didn't ask for favors. I didn't ask to be watched. I asked for responsibility. And they gave it to me. The first time I faced live fire, I wasn't even the one holding the radio. I was walking second in formation when the pop, pop, pop of semi-automatic bursts shattered the silence ahead of us. Sand flew, shouts exploded. For a second, just a second, I froze. And then something clicked. Not panic, not adrenaline. I dropped low, pulled the man next to me into cover, checked my weapon, radioed back. Contact. 2 clicks north. Returning fire. I sounded calm, like I'd done it before. Truth is, I hadn't. But I had prepared for it in my mind 1,000 times, and I wasn't about to let anyone, including myself, see anything less than full control. When it was over, one of the other soldiers patted me on the shoulder. He didn't say, "Good job." He just looked at me with this strange mix of surprise and approval, like I had just rewritten a story he was sure he knew the ending to. That nod meant more than any medal. The months that followed were a blur of dust, heat, long marches, tired bones, and whispered courage. But I kept rising. Mission after mission, I volunteered. While others asked when we were going home, I asked how I could be better. While others tried to avoid evaluations, I requested them. Because every challenge was a step higher on the ladder out of my past, out of that dining room, out of that bet, out of every insult that ever brushed past me like it didn't matter. And I was climbing fast. By the time I was promoted to lieutenant, I had already served 2 tours. I had lost friends, written letters to families, stood in silence during flag-folding ceremonies I'll never forget. War makes you grow up fast. But so does being doubted your whole life. Both build the same callus. Both force you to decide what kind of person you're going to be when there's no one left to tell you who to be. And then, something happened that brought all those years of silence crashing back. I received a message from home. Not from my dad, not from Frank, but from my mom. She told me my grandfather, her father, had passed. We weren't close, but I had always respected him. He taught me how to sharpen a knife when I was 6. Let me drive his old truck in the pasture when I was 10. Never told me I couldn't do something. But when the will was read, I was left out. No letter, no mention, nothing. My mom cried on the phone, said she didn't understand it. But I did. Frank had been there. Frank had a say. Frank made sure I was erased. She left the family, he'd said, according to one of my cousins. She picked the army. Let them take care of her. And with that, the final line was drawn. I wasn't just out of the will. I was out of their story. I hung up the phone, sat still for a long time. Then I folded the edge of my cot blanket, laced up my boots, and went outside. It was over 100 degrees. No breeze, just sun and sand and the heavy air of an empty afternoon. And I ran. For miles. Not to escape it, but to carry it. To carry the weight they didn't want, the one I'd earned. Because by then, I knew something that they never would. I didn't need a family name carved in stone to make me feel real. I didn't need inheritance or applause. I had something they couldn't take. And I was just getting started. I thought I'd feel different when the message came. It was a plain brown envelope with a wax seal and my name, Lieutenant Commander Danielle Foster, typed in sharp military script. Inside, a single sheet of paper. It read, "You are hereby nominated for promotion to Rear Admiral, pending ceremonial approval." No fanfare, no confetti. Just a moment that would shift the axis of everything I had built. And still, I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I didn't even smile right away. I just stared at the paper and exhaled. Because I already knew what this meant. He'd have to stand. The ceremony was scheduled for 5 weeks later at the Navy's Central Command compound. It would be public, formal, tightly orchestrated. Guest seating was limited, reserved for high-ranking officers, dignitaries, and select family. And for the first time in over a decade, I wrote Frank's name on an invitation list. I stared at the envelope with his name for a long time before sealing it. Not out of forgiveness, not out of sentiment, out of design. I wanted him to be there, not to see me succeed, but to feel the weight of the moment he once laughed at. He didn't have to like me. He just had to salute me. The morning of the ceremony was cool and gray. I stood in front of the mirror, slipping into my navy dress blues. Every piece was precise. Jacket pressed to perfection, gold buttons aligned, metal ribbons polished and straight. I ran a finger slowly down the edge of my silver collar tab and paused. Then, like I always did before a major moment, I reached into my drawer and pulled out an old folded note. The one from my cousin Eric. "Dad says you won't make it past week 8. I smiled. I didn't need it anymore, really. But I carried it anyway, because it reminded me where I started and how far I had climbed above the noise. The compound was already bustling when I arrived. Guests were filing in. Flags fluttered above the stage. Photographers adjusted lenses. A brass ensemble quietly tuned up in the corner. I kept my gaze forward as I was led past the line of seated guests. I could feel eyes on me, some familiar, some not. Nods of respect. Quiet greetings. But I didn't respond to any of them until I saw her. My mother, front row, wearing her cream-colored dress, tissue balled in her hand, eyes full of pride, and seated next to her, suit too tight, arms folded awkwardly, jaw clenched, was Frank. He looked older than I remembered, smaller, diminished not just by age, but by presence, like a balloon slowly losing air after years of being filled with the wrong kind of pride. His eyes met mine, but only for a moment. He blinked first. I stood tall as the master of ceremonies took the podium and cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we honor a soldier, a strategist, and a leader whose career has been marked by discipline, valor, and transformation." I didn't flinch. It is my privilege to formally promote Lieutenant Commander Danielle Foster. The name landed like a bell in the air. To the rank of Rear Admiral. The room shifted as hundreds rose to their feet, but one moment swallowed everything else. Frank, standing slowly, shoulders straight, face unreadable, and then his hand, trembling just slightly, lifted in salute. To me. The girl he said would break, the one he bet against, the one he erased from the will, now outranked him, now commanded the room he sat in. I returned the salute without emotion, not out of pettiness, out of power. He didn't own a single piece of this moment, but he had to stand in it. He had to acknowledge it. He had to watch the very thing he said I could never become. Stand above him. That wasn't revenge. That was justice. The applause came and went. The Vice Admiral handed me the official papers. There were photos, handshakes, and a few whispered, well-deserved remarks. And then, the speech. I walked to the podium. My boots echoed with each step. The room hushed. I looked out at the sea of faces, uniforms, suits, family members. I let the pause stretch long enough for silence to settle on every shoulder. Then I spoke. My name is Danielle Foster, and I've served this nation for over a decade, not because I was trying to be seen, but because I believed in something bigger than myself. Eyes watched, still, respectful. I wasn't the fastest, I wasn't the strongest, but I showed up every day, especially on the days I wanted to disappear. I swallowed hard, then continued. There were people who told me I wouldn't last, that I didn't belong in uniform. Some of those voices were strangers. Some were family. A few faces shifted in the crowd. To those who said I'd break, I thank you, because you forced me to build something no one could tear down. And then I looked directly toward the front row. To every young woman who's ever been mocked for daring to dream outside the lines, let them laugh, let them doubt, then outrank them. I ended it there. I didn't wait for a standing ovation. I stepped down in silence. The reception afterward was a blur of polite conversations and firm handshakes. I posed for photos. I hugged old colleagues. I accepted words of admiration from people I once had to prove myself to. But eventually, like I knew he would, Frank approached. He walked slowly, hands in his pockets, face carefully neutral. He stopped a few feet in front of me. You made it, he said, voice quiet. I nodded. Yes, I did. He looked down at his shoes, then back up. Guess I didn't see it in you back then. I tilted my head slightly. You weren't supposed to. It wasn't your vision. He looked like he wanted to say more. Maybe an apology, maybe not. But I didn't need it. That salute today, I added. That was for every moment you said I wouldn't get here. He gave a quiet nod. You earned it. And with that, I walked away. The night sky had settled by the time I reached the edge of the compound. I looked up, stars scattered like silent metals across the heavens. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had something to prove, because I had already won, not by fighting harder, by rising higher. The night had fully arrived by the time I left the reception hall. I slipped off my heels, walked barefoot across the empty parade ground, and let the grass cool my tired feet. The weight of the medals on my chest, the tightness of the dress blues, the endless line of handshakes, all of it began to fade into the quiet. It was just me now. Just Danielle Foster. Not Rear Admiral, not soldier, just the girl they once laughed at. And I stood there in that quiet dark, thinking not of the ceremony, but of the younger version of me who once walked away from her own birthday party in tears. She didn't know what she was walking toward. She only knew she didn't belong at that table. I wish I could talk to her. Tell her it gets better, that the silence from your own family doesn't last forever, it just becomes quieter in your own heart. That the laughter they aimed at your dreams, it wasn't truth. It was fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of the version of you that would grow past them. Fear that maybe, just maybe, you were capable of something they couldn't even picture for themselves. And that fear? It makes people cruel. I used to wonder if I was too sensitive, too emotional, too soft to wear the uniform I had always dreamed of. But over the years, I've learned something valuable. Being underestimated is a secret weapon. When no one sees you coming, you get to write your own story in peace. You get to build in silence. You get to rise without them clapping, because when you reach the top, the only sound left is yours. Your boots, your breath, your voice. And when that voice finally speaks, they have no choice but to listen. Let me be clear about something. This wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about reckoning. Because every person who has ever been told they're not enough knows this truth. There comes a moment, if you keep going, when the people who laughed at you have to look up to find you. That moment doesn't come with fireworks. It comes in a room full of quiet people who suddenly realize you didn't need their approval. You never did. Frank's salute wasn't closure because he changed. It was closure because I changed. Because I no longer needed him to say, "I'm proud of you." I had become someone I could be proud of. Someone who fought through heat, bullets, politics, and bias. Someone who led under pressure. Someone who stood for others before standing for herself. Someone who became the very thing she dreamed of becoming while sitting silently in the corner of a laughing room. Rear Admiral Danielle Foster. But this isn't just about me. This is for you, the person watching, listening, remembering. Maybe you're in school. Maybe you're starting over at 40. Maybe you're working a job no one respects while quietly saving up to launch your dream. Maybe you're surrounded by people who think your dreams are too big for your body. Let me tell you something. You don't owe anyone a single explanation. Not your uncle, not your boss, not your old friends who don't get it. Let them doubt. Let them laugh. Let them dismiss you, because every moment they waste underestimating you is a moment you spend becoming unstoppable. And someday it will happen. You'll get the promotion, you'll sign the contract, you'll walk across the stage, you'll launch the business, you'll put on the uniform, you'll earn your rank, whatever that means in your world. And they'll have to stand. Maybe they'll say something. Maybe not. Maybe they'll pretend they supported you all along. Maybe they'll avoid eye contact, too ashamed to admit they were wrong. But that doesn't matter, because in that moment, you'll know. You did it. And they'll know it too, even if they can't say it out loud. I walked back to my car that night alone. No music playing, no celebration waiting, just the feeling of something full and quiet in my chest. Because it wasn't about who showed up for me. It was about who I showed up as. And that's what matters most. So here's my final message to you. If you've ever been erased, forgotten, ignored, or mocked for daring to dream, keep going. Run, march, crawl if you must, but never stop. Because every insult can be fuel. Every silence can be motivation. Every room that laughed at you becomes smaller in the rear view. And when they finally have to salute you, you won't need their recognition, because you'll have already given yourself something more powerful. If this story spoke to your soul, type "I'll earn that salute" in the comments. Subscribe for more stories of quiet strength, earned victories, and becoming everything they said you couldn't. And share this with someone who's fighting through the silence right now. Let them know they're not alone, because the world will doubt you until the day it has no choice but to stand for you.